Let me ask you this. All right. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because, we talk about this all the time. The narrative is out there that the Tea Party this was a big defeat for the Tea Party. Now, and I talked about this with earlier this week with Dave Weigel. The fact of the matter is that the Tea Party is a brand name of the Republican base, and it seems
That's
to
right.
me the only difference between a so-called establishment Republican and a Tea Party Republican, so-called Tea Party Republican, is at this point has just become a function of media savvy and media training. In other words, there is very little policy difference between these people. I mean, people are even talking about immigration. Look, that proves my point. The Republican base was against immigration in 2005, and they weren't able to do anything.
It would have gotten done by now if they'd ever been for it.
Right.
I mean,
and now you have Republican leaders also against immigration. The only thing that has changed is that the base of the Republican Party has taken over the entire party. I mean, and that story is so old that it is the thesis of a book I wrote in 2006 with Stephen Sherrill, which is essentially what was marginal when we were kids is now the center of the Republican Party.
That's right. I mean, basically, we'll go the quick run through so we don't waste too much time on it because it's pretty clear is that the Southern strategy, which really started on a sort of conscious and forward level with Nixon, but has been going on, to a certain degree for a long time since, Strom Thurmond broke away and ran as a Dixiecrat in 1948 and conservative white males, particularly in the South, were moving towards, who were based on race, largely on racism, also on some religious issues and others, were moving to the Republican Party. For a while, they were just the foot soldiers. But they moved into positions of control. They took over local school boards, they took over local party committees, and they started becoming the people that actually were running for office and saying what they thought and had no media savvy, as you said. I mean, perfect example, right? Didn't Dana Loesch say that Cliven Bundy's only problem was he didn't have media training? There you go.
Yep.
If you get media training, you don't start expounding on the Negro, as Barack Obama himself pointed out. If you don't get that media training, perhaps you do, or you say you're a witch, or you say things like that. You're talking about Second Amendment remedies if you're sharing angle out in Nevada and other things like that. So you say the crazy things that about rape being a wonderful, joyous gift from God that people learn not to say if they're in the so-called establishment. But in the end, as I brought up John Cornyn before, as was pointed out, because he was challenged by a literal lunatic, Steve Stockman, from the right, and Cornyn held on. Cornyn has something like the second or third most conservative voting record in the Senate. Same thing with Saxby Chambliss, who in the end jumped out so a bunch of these crazy people could run for this open race in Georgia, where supposedly more mainstream people are going to be in the runoff, like Jack Kingston, somebody who advocated that kids who are getting school age should be sleeping up in those schools because that wouldn't cause them to be stigmatized at all. There is no difference at this point. The base is taken over. There's no moderate wing anymore. There's a handful of people that you could call moderate-ish, but I would still say we'd call them conservatives with a couple of things they're willing to be moderate on. And for the most part, the rest of the party, are right-wing loons, and you see it. I mean, because some of these guys who predate what us talking about the Tea Party, someone like Jim Inhofe, is one going to argue that he's establishment? I mean, would we get that argument? Or some of these right-wing senators from places like Idaho, so they were coming from all these spots before the Tea Party thing was invented, where it became a useful thing for the Koch brothers and others to push, as if there was some difference between them and the rest of the party.
Right, and let me just and Michael made this point about the Gingrich Revolution the other day. I mean, the bottom line is this. I mean, you can just simply. I mean, the argument is not between ideologies in this party. It is, and you can tell this by just the fact that the way that the GOP establishment is described. They're simply the establishment. They're not. There's no ideological difference. This is not the Progressive Caucus versus the New Democrats. This is not an ideological battle in the Republican Party. It is two different companies in the same industry. And the industry is now just extreme conservatism, and it's just who's going to get the money. And in some respects, the industries just work so that they can both get money.
Right.
It's always good to have a competitor.
And they argue over what the base is. The base is mostly anti-immigration, as you pointed out. But even the members of the base who are pro-immigration reform are for it because the corporate part of the base is for it. Right? They're not for it because they're for progressive policy and they care about bringing 12 million people out of the shadows and helping people become citizens because they couldn't care less about that. There's maybe a few exceptions there, but for the most part, no. They want to create a labor pool.
Right. Now,
if you look
this
within
is
the reasons for...
I'm sorry, but this is a pre-existing divide in the Republican Party immigration.
And, that is exactly
and if you
right.
can show
and they're both
me
different parts of the base.
Show me another example of a divide on just about anything else that corporations have a problem with. I mean, honestly, what else are we seeing where there's this corporate so-called non-corporate divide? There isn't one.
And again, I still would say they're all part of the base, but the only other thing that I never heard the Chamber of Commerce advocate for that the other side of the party isn't for is sort of laughable. And when I say the other side of the party, I mean the other 98% of them, which is the Chamber of Commerce advocates for spending on infrastructure because it would create jobs and the companies that are in the Chamber of Commerce would get contracts and the rest. And oops, the whole Republican Party has become hostage to, starve the beast, cut spending. No spending is good under any circumstances. That's not just a wing of the party. That's where they all are. Right. So your point is exactly right on. They split on immigration. It's really just about it. And if they split on anything else, it's not a Tea Party versus non-Tea Party fight. It's a which wing of the base are you from? Kind of like you've got you've got a division of the party, Rand Paul, some of them who are more against foreign intervention, and you've got a neocon wing of the party that's for intervention. Well, those are both the base too.
Right. So that is also a pre-existing that debate also pre-exists.
Exactly.
The emergence of the so-called Tea Party.